There is a lot of change and uncertainty happening in the world right now. And as a result, many of us are experiencing an increased amount of fear in our day-to-day lives. Between the news and social media, we are being inundated with information that reminds us that there is something out there to be afraid of. If left unchecked, chronic levels of fear can quickly become debilitating, leading to significant distress and anxiety, which limits our ability to experience joy in life, and will no doubt contribute to the 1 in 4 of us who already suffer from an anxiety disorder and the nearly 8% of us who experience post-traumatic stress disorder. This presentation is not about whether the fear is justified or not. I'm here to explore the mental, emotional, and physical consequences of excess fear on our health, the health of our community, and how those consequences can be mitigated. Just like understanding how a car engine works allows the mechanic to repair the car when it breaks down, it's my dream that by lifting the hood on fear, you can understand the biological processes that give rise to the emotion of fear, how that impacts your health, and what you can do to overcome fear and experience good health and be a pillar of strength for those around you. So I hope you enjoy this information, and I hope it allows you to thrive in the face of adversity. To really understand your fear, you first need to know a little bit about the human brain. Now, there are 3 levels to the human brain, and each level roughly corresponds to our evolution as a species. The first brain I want to talk about is the reptilian brain. These are the same structures that still exist in reptiles, and they're the deepest, most ancient part of our brains. Mostly consists of just a brain stem, and this part of our brain acts very instinctively for survival. The next level of brain is the mammalian brain. Now, the mammalian brain is also geared towards survival, but it's responsible for more complex emotional processes. This developed when we became mammals, because as mammals, we lived in a bit of a tribe. We relied on each other. We needed to raise our young, look after the young, care about the young. So again, the mammalian brain is more responsible for emotional processes, but it's still geared towards survival. If you didn't care about your young, the species wouldn't survive. So it's all geared towards survival. Now, before I go any further, between the reptilian brain and the mammalian brain, you could call this the emotional brain. These are really geared towards emotions. It's all about survival. If there's something threatening your survival, you experience negative emotion, distress, and that's designed to get you to move. Like a bed sore makes you roll over. If you're not uncomfortable, you don't do anything, you don't seek safety. So the emotional brain's designed to make us uncomfortable so we can seek survival and safety. And then you've got the human brain, okay, represented here by the green. Now, the human brain is more responsible for complex ideas, learning languages, symbols, assessing ideas, thinking critically, that type of thing. And they all have a role to play in fear. Now, the human brain, that's the thinking brain. So it can basically communicate to the lower levels of our brain, the reptilian mammalian brain, and say, you're reacting or overreacting, or you're reacting accordingly. So we're going to get to that in a little bit. But what links all these systems together when it comes to fear is the limbic system. So the limbic system is responsible for your level of alertness, which would correspond to the reptilian brain. It corresponds to processing emotions, mammalian brain. And then it's also got to do with memory and learning, the human brain. So the limbic system combines all these levels of mind and brain together when we experience fear. So you might be wondering, how does that actually happen? Well, when we look at experiencing fear, I might jump over here. When we look at experiencing fear, it all happens in the amygdala. The amygdala is this little Brazil nut, like a nut-sized part of your reptilian brain, and it's always surveying the environment for a threat. And it's very trigger happy. That's the thing that you've got to understand. The amygdala in the reptilian brain is very trigger happy because as a species, we evolved with what's called a negative bias. That means we have a tendency to think of the worst case scenario. There were 2 types of mistakes you could make as a species. You could assume that there was a tiger in the weeds when there wasn't, or you could assume there wasn't a tiger in the weeds when there was. So one mistake you can keep making, the other mistake you make once and you're dead. So it is in our interest as a species for our survival to think of the worst case scenario because it's better safe than sorry. That's why the amygdala tends to be really, really hyperactive. So once that amygdala senses that there's some type of threat out there, it communicates to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is in the mammalian brain. It's got to do with emotional processes and the release of hormones. So the amygdala goes, there's a problem. Hey, hypothalamus, take care of this. The hypothalamus then talks to the pituitary gland, which releases hormones. Now, hormones are the physiological underpinnings of your emotions. The emotions that you experience are just hormonal changes in your body, which is really, really useful to know. But basically what happens is once the amygdala feels threatened, it tells the hypothalamus to release hormones. It releases certain hormones and that dictates your state. So you can be in a state of rest or a state of stress or a state of relaxation. But in any case, once those stress hormones get released, your body begins to undergo a series of physiological changes to deal with that perceived threat. Okay, you need to have changes happen in your body so you can fight that predator or flee from it. So what happens is the amygdala sends electrical signals to the adrenal glands down here. The hypothalamus releases stress hormones up here, and a bunch of hormonal changes start to happen. We go into a stress response. We go into the fight or flight response. At that point, you're going into the sympathetic branch of the nervous system, which means that you're preparing for maximal physical motor output, fighting or fleeing. Your heart rate goes up, your breathing rate goes up, your bloods go to the muscles and those muscles contract, including the muscles on your hairs, which makes your hairs stand on end. This was actually designed to, well not designed, but it's there to make animals look bigger and more formidable, because when the hairs stand up, you look bigger, which is really interesting. Your blood sugar goes up and basically your priority is survival. You are just trying to survive. Now, when the sympathetic response lifts, the opposite response, the parasympathetic response drops. What that means is that your digestive processes are compromised, your absorption processes are compromised, so you're not absorbing nutrients. Your elimination processes are compromised, so you're not eliminating waste. Basically, anything that's not critical to immediate survival is put on pause. So that's where your digestive assimilation and elimination processes are paused. Immune processes are put on pause. Also, this sense of affection for others and connection, which is critical in the mammalian brain for survival. You know, we need others to survive. We need our tribe. Even that process is put on hold because you got to get to safety before you can worry about loving others, right? So that's why high levels of stress or fear can actually compromise your relationships. Okay, you're not willing to feel open and connected and vulnerable, and this can, like I said, really compromise your relationships. Your ability to thrive in this state is significantly dropped. All you can do is survive, and this is a massive, massive problem. You can understand that if this is extended for a long amount of time where you're not eliminating waste, you're not taking in nutrients, you're not fighting disease, you can see how the body would break down. You can see how mental and emotional disorders could develop. But that's not all what happens. This all happens quite immediately because it's better to be safe than sorry. What also happens, if we go back over to here, the amygdala at the same time, once it's kicked off this response, it sends information to the hippocampus. The hippocampus is located in the human brain, responsible for memory and learning. Now, what it does is basically cross-references the information of that perceived threat with information in your memory bank. So what that means is that the thinking brain can let the emotional brain know whether it's reacting appropriately. So what that means is, let's say you've got a friend that jump scares you and you experience that rush. You go through this stress response. I'm scared. But then you look at whoever's jumped out to scare you and it might be your friend. And then your thinking brain, your human part of your brain, recognizes that it's just a friend playing a joke. You calm down. Or you might be watching a scary movie, but you know your human brain, your thinking brain, your hippocampus knows that it's just a movie. There's no need to go crazy with this response. So again, the thinking brain lets the emotional brain know if it's responding appropriately. So that happens there. Once again, that dictates your hormones, because if it's just a friend, your hormones change and you calm down, once again determining your state. But if it turns out that it is a threat, what your body then does is it programs that threat into your memory and logs it as, yes, be afraid of that. So it's about learning what to be afraid of so you can keep yourself safe. Now, this is a massive problem because right now, during this crazy time, we're being told to stay away from each other, be alone, there's a lot of fear. And without even realizing, we are programming that fear into our nervous system, and this becomes long term. It affects us in the long term, because if we start seeing people get close to us, if people walk too close, we want to get a hug, but we're being scared of this disease or this condition, we're going to experience a stress response when anyone gets close. We're programming our bodies to freak out and experience fear when people get close because we don't want to get sick, right? So you can see how, like, particularly with children, especially in the very early years between 2 and 4, those developmental years, if you're teaching your kids to stay away and to be afraid of connecting to others, that's going to wreak havoc on their development. The other thing that's really interesting about the human brain, and the brain in general, is that it gets good at doing what it's used to doing. So if you're used to feeling afraid and stressed, you get very good at becoming afraid and stressed, and you will find it increasingly harder to relax. What this means is that you're going to spend more time in the sympathetic stress branch. You're not allowing yourself to relax and rejuvenate yourself. This is the root cause of all disease. All disease. So mental and emotional and physical conditions boil down to this response. And when you understand this, when you understand how these nervous systems work, it's no wonder you're not digesting food, you're not assimilating nutrients, you're not eliminating waste, you're not fighting disease, your heart rate's up, you're putting pressure on your heart, you're breathing too much, your blood sugar's up, type 2 diabetes, like this all stems from here. So if you're not managing your fear, you will get sick. You will find it difficult to form relationships because you're not allowing people to get close, because you've programmed your body to freak out when people do get close. Massive problem. So what do we do about it? The first thing is awareness. A lot of these phobias become programmed unconsciously. People don't understand the long-term consequences of the way they're behaving. But now if you understand this information, and hopefully I've done a good job of explaining it to you, you now can make the conscious choice to do something different. But before that, it all begins with awareness. You need to keep awareness in your body. You need to start recognizing when you're in that fear response, when you're in that stress response. Once you recognize you're in that fear response, what you can do is learn to self-regulate. This is something I teach my clients. We have the ability to influence our state. So like the other thing that's really interesting is that the mind, or rather the nervous system, responds to thought or reality the same way. All you need to do is imagine the worst case scenario and you feel that uncomfortable feeling and those negative emotions. That's your thoughts influencing your hormonal profile in your body. So thought or reality, the body reacts the same. So you need to consciously choose to think more positive thoughts, or at least give yourself some rest by not thinking at all. So that's one way to do it. And then you can learn to self-regulate, which I teach a lot of my clients. And I'm happy to send you some resources if you're interested, just reach out. But self-regulation is really important. And yeah, just being aware. Between stimulus and response, you have the choice to choose. So by being aware of how you're responding and being proactive, you can induce this parasympathetic stress response and feel a bit more at ease. And I'm not saying you need to stop worrying, because there are things out there to worry about. This was all designed to keep us alive. But if we don't consciously induce a rest response, we will get sick. So make sure you are using your awareness of what your state is. Learn to self-regulate, learn to induce a rest response, meditate, do some breath work. Just be aware, okay? Be aware of what you're programming into your body and make the conscious choice to create a more loving, safer, conscious you. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting. Leave a comment, ask any questions, and I'll see you next time. Lots of love.